Eat to perform, not to look good. Fighting is a performance sport, not an aesthetic sport. Khamzat is a Ferrari. I just put the right fuel in. What we know is that the higher the intensity, the higher the heart rate, the more your body relies on carbohydrate. Then, of course, the lower the heart rate, the more your body relies on fat. So the story behind the Mikey diet, I think it was doing a very low carb diet or something like that. And I told him, I remember, it's like, Mikey, I think that's not the way. A weight cut, it's an extreme procedure. It's a professional risk in an extreme sport.
Their heaviest training day of the week. What kinds of foods are you making for that person or that day?
We'll definitely have a big dish of
I'm joined today by Dr. Matteo Capodaglio, high-performance sports nutritionist. He holds a master's degree in human nutrition from the University of Milan, is the director of performance at Capo Nutrition, and has worked with the likes of Khamzat Chimaev, Arman Tsarukyan, Marvin Vettori, Mikey Musumeci, Dante Leone, and so many other incredible athletes. Dr. Matteo, thank you so much for taking the time to come on here. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Buongiorno, as we will say in Italian.
Buongiorno. I'm sure that was horrible pronunciation.
It was good.
I appreciate it. So, when you take a step back and look at your life, what it looks like right now, you just worked with Khamzat Chimaev and he just became the UFC middleweight champion, which is incredible. You've worked with incredible high-level athletes. When you take a step back and look at what your life has become, tell us a bit of a story of how you got to this place.
Well, it was a crazy journey. I'm born and raised in a small city by Venice called Padua, or Padua in English. And I was raised to be a pharmacist. Pharmacies back then were privately owned, and they're small businesses. My mom used to own one, and so I literally went through the whole like school journey thinking that I was gonna become one, and I did actually. I got my my PharmD at the University of Rome, and I got board certified, and I worked for about a year there, and I realized it was just not my thing. At the time, I was writing a lot in MMA forums. There was one in particular in Italy that was called MMAmania.it. Doesn't exist anymore. And I think there was a huge thread about the whole like Nick Diaz versus Carlos Condit fight, and the whole trash talking thing. And I was tired of people talking bad about Nick Diaz, so I defended him in a very long post. And the play-by-play announcer of the UFC that was in Italy, that was part of that forum, sent me a DM and telling me that it liked the way I was voicing my opinion, and that he was. So we kept in touch, and after a few months, he told me he was going to start this newspaper about MMA. And he wanted someone to cover the local scene in Rome. They were doing some events, and so I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." It was, of course, it was not a job; it was more like of a free gig that I was taking. And I remember there was this event in Rome. I think the name was Impera, and I started to read the stats, trying to be a professional. And I saw this kid that at the time was, I think, 19 years of age, that didn't really get a lot of attention from the local scene because he was training abroad in London. So by the time he came to the weigh-ins, he was like by himself, essentially. He didn't have a team. And I was by myself because I was just a rookie. I was 24 years of age, or maybe even 23. I don't remember. But anyway, that kid happened to me, Marvin. So it was Marvin, was 2-1 at the time, I think, fighting out of London, shoot fighter. We connected, and after that, I didn't really know I was going to be a nutritionist, but I remember I reached out and I told him, hey, I think we can be a team, and that's how we started. So at the beginning, I was like helping in many ways with the social media. There was Facebook at the time. Instagram was not as big. And then, you know, he asked me some question about supplements. And of course, I already had the doctor of pharmacy, so I knew a little bit. And then one thing led to the other. And actually, 10 years ago, like around this time of the year, we had our first trip to Southern California. He joined Kings. 1 year later, he made it to the UFC. And again, I at that point I dropped my job as a pharmacist, and I followed him. So in 2018, I was able to start Capo Nutrition in here in Southern California, and you know, and then the whole thing got like crazy big, and I'm very blessed to be in this position now.
That's such a crazy story. So back in the day when you first met Marvin, it sounds like you kind of saw that you had a connection and had some value to maybe give him. What was it that you saw in Marvin that made you want to work together and try to see if you could make this dream of working in MMA come true?
I think there's a huge barrier for Italian fighters to make it at the highest level. And then that is the will to relocate somewhere else where MMA is more of a mainstream sport. In Italy, we definitely had some talent, but we don't have the bodies. We don't have like as many coaches, and of course, we don't have the sponsors, the money, and stuff. So a lot of people like they get to a pretty good level. They will fighting like Cage Warrior. I don't know if you're familiar with that promotion, but that's huge in Europe, or similar ones. Brave, EFC in South Africa, and then maybe they get to the Contender Series and they cannot get to the UFC. Like, unfortunately, we have a very bad record of Italian fighters going to the Contender Series. The Contender Series was not a thing back in the days, but Marvin had that will. Like at 18, when he was done with high school, he just moved to London. He started to work as a bouncer. I think he was also like a model or something for Hollister at the beginning, you know, at the stores,
Whoa.
or
Yeah.
Abercrombie. I can't remember, but something like that. And yeah, you know, you can tell whatever you want about Marvin. He has like a unique personality. Sometimes he's very like rough. And loud, but he always put the work. And I think that is that consistency, that obsession is one of the main characteristics that a UFC fighter needs to have. So that I was attracted to that will to go out of his comfort zone that I also had because you know quitting my job with I remember my mom and my boss at the time told me you know, in this house we have rules. So if you take the door to leave, the door is going to be closed to you for you if
Mm.
something goes wrong. So I knew that was a risk, but I took it, and I guess it paid off for the both of us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's totally paid off. And one thing that I think there's a lot of people that, are big fans of MMA and that maybe train a little bit but don't want to they want to work in MMA but don't want to pursue being a fighter. And I think that the way you forged your path is really interesting. And I think it's a path that a lot of people don't see. A lot of people don't see the work that goes on behind the scenes, all the people that contribute to the fight camps. And that brings me to another question that I have for you. In your day-to-day life right now, what does it look like? How are you contributing to these fighters' camps? How are you making their nutrition plans on a day-to-day basis? And
Yeah.
even I see that sometimes you're flying out and you're cooking for them yourself. So what does your day-to-day job look like these days?
Well, I wish I could tell you I have a day to day. That's something I'm missing in my life. So the traveling has been very hectic in the past, especially 18 months. But what I do essentially, I do consulting for both professional and recreational athletes. So yes, I work with Khamzat Chimaev, that's the UFC champion, but I also work for say, the executive that's taking just jujitsu classes at 6 a.m. in the morning. I do this consulting remotely, so with people from all around the world. And then the another interesting thing was back in days, I was not really cooking for athletes. And then when I moved to the States, one of my first American UFC athlete, Lauren Murphy, she told me, actually, she asked me if I could come to fight week. She was actually fighting an Italian. That was a pretty weird situation. But and I was there. Her husband brought the, how do you call, the hot pots, those portable cooktops that you can just plug in the hotel. And I was like, well, you know what? I can cook a pasta, and it's something it's something very basic for me as an Italian that always ate decently. And everyone was mesmerized by the cooking, and they started to post about that. So other athletes started to ask me to cook during fight week because it's convenient, because it's healthier compared to your average restaurant, and it's highly super easy to customize, right, according to your needs. So then I started that, and of course I started to travel more. But I will say usually my obligation remotely with the fighter, and on the Tuesday of fight week, that's where I fly out wherever they are, and I stay with them throughout the fight week. I help with the weight cut, the recharge, of course, and then I go home after the fight. There have been some exceptions to that with Khamzat because he asked for a different service. So I took care of the whole camping in person with an assistant for about 2 months before the Dricus du Plessis fight. And the same I did with Arman in South Florida last December on what was probably like the most tragical outcome of a training camp. Unfortunately, we know what happened. Again, I'm never going to get tired of saying it was an injury. The guy, Arman, could make weight, just, that happened. And that was the only thing to do. Like he just couldn't fight. So, but yeah, so mainly the work is like 80% remotely, and then I just meet the fighters on fight week. So today is Friday, November 14th, and tomorrow I'm gonna be leaving. I'm gonna go to Qatar because Arman is facing Danuker on the first Qatar card. I'm gonna be leaving a little earlier, just because it's a long flight and I want to adjust to the new time zone, and also Arman is gonna be there starting from Sunday. So yeah, this is my routine. I try to work out when I can, try to spend some time in my own kitchen, trying to perfect my recipe. But it's yeah, it's pretty much this.
What a crazy life that you have. And that Armand Dan Hooker fight is one that I think all the fans, I speak for all the fans when I say that we're super, super excited for that. It's going to be a great one. And so it sounds like you are working with kind of a range. Your consulting work is with fighters or sorry, athletes that are maybe not full time, they have other work. And you also are working with some of the elites in the UFC. So are there any characteristics or, things that come to mind that you feel differentiate the fighters that really make it far in either MMA or jiu-jitsu? What kind of qualities do you think that they have that you've noticed that you feel differentiate them?
It's a great question. I believe overall perseverance, because that's what separates like athletes that end up being exceptional to the one that they're average. The ability to bounce with critical thinking from a loss, I think that's very important, without getting too crazy about like blaming your surrounding. Just like take a deep breath, and yes, if some changes are necessary, you make the changes, but you're not trying to uh, not have ownership of your own mistakes. And yeah, those are, I will say, are the main. Oh, and also the ability to trust your team members, because of course you're gonna hear so many opinions, and it's very, very easy to get sidetracked. But
Hmm.
like having trust on your striking coach, your wrestling coach, on the game plan, I think it's paramount. And we had a great example when in the new bromance, Khamzat Arman, Khamzat went to the corner. I don't know if it was the third or the fourth round, and he asked Arman about what do you think about striking, and Arman was like, "Hey, stick to the same game plan because it's gonna pay dividends," and that's what Khamzat did, and of course, it paid off.
Hmm. Absolutely. That fight was pure dominance. And I think that's a really great point, that last one about trusting in your team, because obviously you have them for a reason and you can't do everything yourself. You can't think through all the options. You can't be an expert in everything. So I think that that's a really, really important quality as well. And so I want to kind of
Yeah.
get into the thick of it with what it looks like when fighters and athletes are fueling themselves properly for their performance. Because obviously, fighters and athletes who are full-time in martial arts are training multiple times a day, especially in MMA. There's so much to practice, there's so much to learn. So it's many practices a day. What does it look like when someone is fueling themselves properly?
It's a great question, and that's also some. I mean, I was talking about perseverance and adhere to a plan. You can definitely split the professional athletic population in two parts. The people that really live differently in the in the off season versus the camp, and people that are essentially all the time kind of like in camp, even though they're more flexible. An example is Arman. Arman is always eating super clean, is living very healthy, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. I think in the off season, if you work with your nutritionist, but also with your strength and conditioning coach, with a physiotherapist, you put the foundation for a successful camp. While if you're in the off season, you're just enjoy life. Then, especially if the UFC give you like a short notice or just a couple of months, that's what usually happens to prepare. Then you're just trying to catch up with your top shape as fast as you can. Um, I really love to work with athletes like Arman. They're devoted to that um, 365 days per week. And don't get me wrong, because there's this misconception like programming a diet in the off season doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to eat rice, broccoli, and I don't know, chicken every day. It just means that
Hmm.
if one day, if we're gonna have pizza, and there are some athletes of mine, they don't even have a pizza; they have one and a half pizzas because one is not enough. Like you just place it in like the right day of the week, say for example. So you have a certain type of training session, and for some reason, like the pizza fits that very well. And then also it's put in a context where you know what you're eating the other like 6 days of the week. So what makes a difference in the long run is the macroscopic picture of your diet, like having gelato, having pasta, having like pizza, lasagna. It's compatible with being an athlete. You just need to find the right measure and the right context. Now, are you gonna have a pizza the day before weigh-ins? Probably not if you're cutting weight. Like, let's be honest with each other. At that point, you really gotta be surgical. But in the off season, considering all the variables, why not?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. It reminds me, I can't remember who said this, but it was a UFC fighter that was talking about this, that was saying that if you stray too much from your routine and your health and your training when you're out of camp, when you're in camp, you're reaching your peak endurance, your peak level of, what you can really bring to training, like only a week or two out from the fight. Whereas if you treat your off season when you're out of camp, like you're still a professional athlete and you're still training regularly and taking care of yourself, then you're peaking way earlier in camp, and then it's just sharpening and making sure you're performing even better, which I think is something that you're totally right that even in the UFC we see both kinds of athletes. I think it's an important thing for people to keep in mind that, you are a professional athlete 365 days of the year, even if you're only fighting like two or three times.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes, I mean, I had the luck to work with athletes like that in MMA, and I think Arman is one of the greatest example. He's really, really super healthy. I had the chance in Jiu-Jitsu with your fellow Canadian, Dante Leon.
Hmm.
Is really, if I could show you, if I could share my screen now and show you the amount of weight logs that I have from him, it's essentially every day. He's the type of guy that 2 days after ADCC bronze medal is like, he calls me and he's like, Coach, I want to get back, you know, and that's great. In the past, I also work with a goalie from the Winnipeg Jets in the NHL, Eric Comrie, and he's also very devoted to, always like kind of eat healthy, very clean, mainly whole foods. And then, of course, there's that time when you have something extra, but it's not gonna change your body composition, your performance, and that also goes for the amateurs. Like, I think one of the pillars of my work, even with the amateurs, is explaining to my athletes, my recreational athletes, they could have that food, but it just needs to be put in the right context. When okay, so far we only talk about nutrition, but where like also recovery plays a role.
Hmm.
So you put everything together and you have a balanced life, but you got to invest in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get a little bit into some more specifics with regards to nutrition. And let's keep in mind, or let's tailor it towards the MMA fighter that's doing multiple classes a day, training
Mhm.
super hard. Let's say you know that your fighter has, the next day maybe they have heavy sparring, they have strength and conditioning, they have grappling. It's like their heaviest training day of the week. What kinds of foods are you making for that person for that day?
Okay, so we're starting from the sparring day or we're starting from the night before?
Okay, let's start from the night before.
Okay, we're gonna start from the night before. And just a disclaimer, guys, like what we're gonna talk about now is just a general recommendation. Like I'm not trying to tell you exactly what to eat because everyone is different, everybody is different. In order to have that like customized on your needs, you should have a one-on-one consultation with any dietitian, nutritionist. But say generally, I will say that your goal is get to that training session optimally hydrated and supercharged in glycogen. I mean, when it comes to the glycogen, we know it's the way our muscle and our liver stores the carbohydrates. Glycogen is the complex. It's a complex carb whose basic unit say glycogen is a wall, the brick is glucose, and you know where glucose comes from. Comes from the pasta, comes from the potatoes, come from the rice. So the night before, we'll definitely have a big dish of one of those carbohydrates. We'll have a moderate amount of protein, a lean protein, because I believe it's like having lean protein later in the day might be easier to digest. Um, we will have some monounsaturated fat, they call like the good fat. So I'm an Italian, so of course, extra virgin olive oil will be a staple of that dinner. So, what would it look like? I'm gonna give you a recipe that I love. Linguine with clams. So you have the linguine, you have the pasta carbohydrates, you have the clams with like a great high quality protein. You have the extra virgin olive oil, and and that I think is a great dinner. But also the timing of the dinner is important. I will say like try to eat at least 3 hours before going to sleep, so you have time to digest, and you're gonna have a great sleep because of course on a sparring day you want to be fully rested, so you have your
Mhm.
um, full night of sleep, and then in the morning. Um, my guys, they really like this. I call it the performance bowl. So it's a mix between like Greek yogurt, whey protein, granola, berries, um, honey, and I put a little bit of chocolate or coconut flakes. That's really a fighter's favorite, if you ask me. And then we might use some beet juice, because that has been proven to increase, how do you say, the aerobic output, because it works on the nitric oxide, cascade, and so has positive effects on the on performance. So that will be what we eat, like the 2 meals that we have before a sparring session. Then of course we're gonna make sure that the athlete is fully hydrated. Means like waking up in the morning and be able to urinate like do you say not too dark, so I have a pretty transparent urine. That will be a good marker of proper hydration. And then of course, like we can play with supplements a little bit. Of course, caffeine has a positive effect on performance. Beta alanine has a positive effect on performance, even though some people don't really enjoy it, because it gives you that tingling feeling. I'm not a big fan of pre-workouts or energy drinks, even though I must say I witness wide use among fighters. But yeah, if you use an energy drink, I just want to say, or if you use any supplement, just and you're like under an anti-doping program, just make sure that's third-party tested, because so many people, not just in the fighting world, even in other sports, even at a collegiate level, they got in trouble because of tainted supplements, and that's a shame. So if you're taking a supplement, I mean, now the UFC is not partnering with USADA anymore, but back in the USADA days, I remember USADA said that on their website that NSF certified for sports is the highest certification that you can find in the United States, at least. And then there are others, of course. If you walk into the UFC Performance Institute, you will see this huge banner saying only take supplements with they're tested by these and these and these, and there's the whole list. But that's definitely something worth mentioning, I would say.
I understand, lots of carbs and, the performance bowl that you talked about sounds amazing. I need to try that for sure. Um, and one thing I want to ask you specifically about MMA fighters is there's obviously striking and grappling have different kinds of needs for your body. So what I want to ask you about that is, do you kind of cater different nutrition needs for a striking day versus more a sparring day?
Not really. What I ask my guys, give me a number between 1 to 10 that explains how hard the session is going to be, and that's going to dictate how I build the plan. Then to me, it doesn't matter if it comes from striking, from jiu-jitsu or wrestling. It's just how hard it is on their body. Yeah, that's the main variable to me.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. And with regards to on the day of, one thing that I always struggle with is the timing of my food in relation to training. What can you tell us about, eating before training, whereas, recovering with food afterwards? What do you think about that?
Okay, it's another very good question. And I will say that while, say, the range of options that you have, say, on a regular sparring day are more limited, the differences that you can have on a fight day, on a competition day, is much bigger. Not because the needs change among athletes, but because on competition day, we must acknowledge that the psychological aspect is as important as the physiological. And that's, again, one of my pillars. Also, nutrition is not just physiology, it's also psychology. I'm not a therapist, but if you want to be successful in this business, you need to understand it. So there are some people that literally, I don't know if I can share the names, I will not, but some elite athletes that will not eat, or they hardly eat on competition day. They go to the competition completely fasted, and they maul their opponents. That's something like extreme that I witnessed. There's some other people. Um, they just see competition day as just another day at the office, and so they're not really tense, and they can eat up to 2.5 hours, 2 hours to the fight. So it's very different. But what I will say, ideally, your competition day is not gonna be much different than your sparring day. So whatever recipe works for you on a sparring day, use it on competition day. You don't want to add anything new to the equation on on competition day, and
Mm.
that goes for nutrition. But I also think it goes for uh, like the technical aspects of the sport. I've seen sometimes like coaches, cornermen, explaining a new technique while the athlete is warming up for a competition. Like I always wondered, like, what's the retention of that information? Probably none. It's like me back at the university days before a final, like asking my peer to tell me some extra information. There's no way I'm gonna remember that during the final. So yeah, just
Mm.
do what works for you. That will be the main thing. But if we're just looking at the physiological side of performance nutrition, sports nutrition, it will be essentially like a very high carb, like medium amount of protein and low fat diet. That will be the textbook nutrition.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to shift gears to talk about let's say a jiu-jitsu athlete that has a full-time job that trains nights, and obviously isn't a full-time athlete as a result, kind of more recreational. One thing that I think a lot of people in that situation struggle with is, you work from 9 to 5, and then usually you're either training at 6 a.m., but let's say this person has young kids and can't have the time in the morning, so they train evenings. Most evening jiu-jitsu classes are 6 to 7, and you get home at around 8, or sometimes 7 to 8, and then you're kind of getting late into the evening. And I think it's a struggle for a lot of people finding the right times to eat to fuel their evening training and, recover for the next day as a result. Like as you mentioned, if you're eating too late in the evening, it can impact your sleep, and that's obviously not what you want. So what kind of advice do you have for nutrition for people in those kind of circumstances?
Again, everyone is very different. Um, I do remember I worked with this. It was a hedge fund guy, so very busy, like finance guy. He was, of course, waking up very early in the morning, and he will train around that time in jiu-jitsu. So what we did is he had pretty big breakfast. He had like normal size lunch, I will say, and that was an early lunch, so he didn't get sleepy. At the office, it's a high demanding job, so you want to always bring the highest performance there. And then we had dinner before training. So that's one good is I don't think is as big of a shock in America because what I learned moving here is like a lot of people have dinner at 5.
Hmm.
It's really not a big deal. While in Italy, it will be such a crazy change of your routine. But yeah, so he will have his dinner about an hour and a half before training, and then he will have like just a smaller dinner, like or sometimes it was even just a protein shake and a couple of fruits, and then he'll go to bed. He'll call it a day.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, that will be like a case report on my side because you're right. The problem with a lot of people that train late in the day, myself as well, I do train jiu-jitsu at Atos now that I'm in
Wow.
San Diego, is that yeah, if you do that training session, then by the time you come home, you shower, you go home, you eat, then you don't have enough time to even digest the food, and you might not have the proper recovery. So that is also for myself a strategy I've been using, and and I love it. Again, everyone is different, might not be the right for you, but I'm just saying for me, and many of my athletes, it worked.
Yeah, yeah, it's something I've been messing around with as well because it's a problem that I think it's a problem that pretty much everyone that does jujitsu that doesn't train in the mornings does. And what do you think about fasted workouts in the morning? Let's say I was doing, 7 a.m. jujitsu classes every day. Do you think that that's a workout that should be fasted, or do you think you should have some food before that kind of workout?
Well, it depends. So I think a good practitioner in any field will say it depends because you need to put some context around it. So it depends. What time do you wake up? How early before the training session you wake up? What is the goal of your training session? Is just like having a decent workout before going to work, or you're training like to perform? If you answer those questions, I think I can give you a more tailored answer, I would say.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think a lot of people in that situation are waking up about an hour before training. For me, when I do morning classes, I'm waking up like 10 minutes before I have to leave, which I know isn't ideal. But say the person that's waking up an hour before and has a bit of a morning routine in place, what would you say for that kind of person? And they're recreational. Maybe they're doing a couple local competitions.
Okay. Well, also it depends what you ate the night before. So if the night before you fully recharge, maybe you don't need that breakfast, as much.
Hmm.
If you didn't have like a great dinner and you still want to perform at your best, then it might be helpful for you to have at least some carbohydrates and maybe some protein before the training. Now, it depends because some people they can eat literally like 15 minutes before the workout and they can be absolutely fine. Some people they need 2 hours. So you really need to adjust to your to how your body, your gut reacts to food before training. I do remember before getting into this crazy combat sports world, I used to play water polo in high school, and I remember I could literally, because I grew up like that, so I could literally came back from school. I will eat like even the heaviest pasta, and just the time to get to the swimming pool, and we will jump in the water, and it was cold, like especially in the winter, like temperature was very cold, but I got used to it, so it was working for me. Now I don't know if it would right now, but yeah, I'll say like understanding how your body works is important first thing. If you can, in your scenario, yeah, try to put some carbohydrates in the body, and of course some liquid before the training, and possibly even some protein. That will be a good starting point.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so another question I have for you, for those that maybe are less informed with, creating a nutrition plan for themselves, they're trying to get the lay of the land and figure out how to take control over their own, take ownership of their nutrition. What are some mistakes that you see when people are first kind of learning the ropes and maybe they're uninformed? What are some of your kind of pet peeves that people are doing that you think are okay, they could be doing that a bit differently?
Relying religiously on devices like smart watches or other piece of hardware. And as I'm talking, I last week I became a Garmin user. I love this one. But at the same time, I think that the companies are the first one to say that these tracker are not like super precise. So eating like 352 calories because you burn 352 calories according to this is not the way to go. This is helpful. It's like an assistant, but needs to be interpreted, I would say. So that is one thing. Um, I will say having a real idea what you're putting in your body versus just, oh, I think I'm like just eating this and that. It's very important. Some people underestimate the amount of calories they put in their body. because they don't count like the snacks, like they don't think about that, that bar they had at like 10 a.m. or 4 p.m. And all those things can add up. And what you think is a hypocaloric diet can be a hypercaloric diet, and that's why you're not losing weight, and then people get frustrated. But when you track, then it's easier to make those adjustments.
So
I
do you
would say
recommend?
that. Sorry, I have another
No,
thing.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
love food first approach is very important. Don't try to look for shortcuts. Supplements will never substitute food. There were, I'm not gonna name it, but there was a huge company worldwide that was telling people, "Oh, just have this shake instead of having like this a full meal." And I think that was pretty bad. So food first approach, whole food mainly, and then we optimize with the supplementation, and take care of your rest as much as you take care of your performance. I think that's also disregarded many times.
Yeah, yeah, the sleep is a really important element of the puzzle that I think a lot of people ignore. And with regards to, starting with your food intake and figuring out what exactly it is that you're eating, do you recommend kind of like a food journal? How do you recommend tracking your food intake?
Even the process of writing it down on a diary uh, is better than just thinking about it. And
Hmm.
I, like maybe not in the nutrition area, but I'm a huge procrastinator. I have maybe a little bit of like deficit disorder, attention deficit at times, and I did found a great ally on this. How do you say it? This portal is called Notion. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I love
And I
Notion.
just write down things like the task that I need to complete, like what hour, and it's been like changing my workflow. And I will say like doing something like that with your food, it's a good first step. You don't want to get too intense, and it doesn't work for anyone. There are some specific cases, and I don't want to get into it, but where you don't like you want to have a more like maybe a milder, moderate approach. But I can tell you that oftentimes people don't really have uh, a reasonable idea of the amount of calories they're putting on their bodies, and that causes a lot of frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So another thing that's kind of a common topic in the nutrition and in the combat sports world is diets and methods of, you know, intermittent fasting and, that kind of thing. So with regards to kind of trendy diets like the carnivore diet, the keto diet, veganism, what do you think about those diets and, positive or negative, good for you, could be better? What do you think?
As I said earlier with the fasting question, I do believe it's always a comparison. So we have the first term, say vegan diet, but then we need to have a second a second type of diet that we're comparing it to, because the vegan diet might be better than like say your unfortunately your typical like Western diet, but maybe compared to a Mediterranean diet is worse, in my opinion. I guess there's a significant body of evidence that supports that. So that is the first step. I do believe in moderation. Uh, I don't believe in foods that are magic, and I don't believe that. I think like most food can be part of your nutrition, and they're not necessarily gonna kill you. Of course, like moderation is key here. So what do I think? And also, I believe that the main factor that contributes to a success of the diet is adherence to it. So
Hmm.
if it works for you, then then great. I am a huge proponent of the Mediterranean lifestyle. So not just diet, the whole like picture lifestyle that includes like a lot of movement outside, includes like human interaction, not being closed in your house or in your office all day, and eat a wide variety of food with an emphasis, if you want, on carbohydrates. I think that is applies very good to the professional and amateur athlete life, I will say. But then, I can tell you, there's some other diets that are also how do you say, they could also be used for athletes. Like you mentioned the vegan diet. Yeah, it's gonna be harder. You might require like how do you say, more target supplementation protocol. But there are some athletes that are vegan and they're doing fairly well. I think it requires much more effort for sure. Even the paleo diet. So you just cut out certain categories of food, but you can have your carbs from sweet potatoes, for example, if you want to go paleo. Now, if you get bored by sweet potatoes or like the other tubers that are allowed, that might be a problem. But theoretically, you could follow a paleo diet that's higher in carbohydrate, hence good for performance. Now, if we're talking about other diets for performance, like the keto diet, that's a little like harder, because the idea of being fat adapted, it's hasn't been proven to be like very true in our sport. What we know is that the higher the intensity, the higher the heart rate, the more your body relies on carbohydrate. Then, of course, the lower the heart rate, the more your body relies on fat. But as soon as you start training, you're going to be carb reliant. So especially if you have multiple training sessions, as you were mentioning earlier, going keto might not be the way. I had vegan athletes, I had vegetarian athletes, pescatarian, of course, omnivorous, but I never had an athlete that told me he was doing great in jiu-jitsu, wrestling, or MMA, and was following a ketogenic diet. It has other great application in clinical nutrition, and I'm not going to get into the details because that's not my field of expertise. But when we talk about performance, especially like in combat sports, I don't think that's the way. Is there any particular diet that you want me to discuss?
Um, I think that covers a lot of the kind of overview of the question I had. I do want to ask you specifically. I know you've worked a little bit with Mikey Musumeci, and he has kind of a unique approach to diet. He's kind of,
Yes.
famous for the Mikey diet. What do you think about, the way he eats?
I can tell you a story about Mikey. He's a great guy. His whole family has always been great to me, and of course, he has Italian heritage, so that's something we have in common. So the story behind the Mikey diet is that after 2019, there was my first big win in a tournament with Augusto Tanquinho Mendes, big underdog that won the 66 kilo. Um, I, Tanquinho gave Mikey my number, and we met. We started to discuss the protocols that he was following. And at that time, I think he recently won Worlds with the gi. That's the first time he beat Bruno Malfacine. I think he was doing a very low carb diet or something like that. And I told him, I remember, I was like, Mikey, I think that's not the way. I understand you need to make weight, but I think you can also make weight while incorporating carbs in your diet. And a few weeks later, he reaches out. He's super enthusiastic, like, "Oh, what you built for me is great and stuff." So going back to adherence, his Italian heritage, he probably had pasta growing up his whole life, and so that's how we build a foundation. And then he started to make the modifications to that protocol according to how he was feeling to increase even more the adherence. He was very like vocal about that with Joe Rogan. And so, we started from a more traditional, like he started from a more traditional Mediterranean protocol, type of protocol, to switch into what became the Mikey Musumeci diet. Uh, Now, and I told him multiple times this. Do I think that's ideal? No, I think some changes needs to be made, and he actually made some changes. Started to include like more protein lately, but he's an adult. He knows his body, and he did what he felt like it was best for him, knowing what's the ideal. So that's one example of definitely like adherence to the diet you like.
Right. So does he really only eat once a day?
Well, back in the days, for sure. Because I stayed at his place a few times, and yes, the whole thing is it is true. Is that like you will not believe it until you see it? It's kind of the same thing with Khamzat and his team. Like they now it's a little less, but they used to train like crazy. Um, but yeah, it's like that now. We had an interaction a few months ago, so we touch base, we meet at the events, and we do talk. I think he started to shift from that a little bit, at least for that period of time when we had that conversation. But definitely at one point, that was his thing for sure.
That's so funny. I had actually one of my training partners, I had to drop down some weight for a competition, and she was like, we do what Mikey does. We only eat once a day.
But here's the thing, like that's why that diet works, or like in general, like those intermittent fasting protocol work a lot, is because in one sitting or even like two sittings, it's hard to be in a hypercaloric diet. So
Hmm.
what's gonna happen is you're gonna, like the first day might be a little harder, but then you get accustomed to the new protocol, and every time you eat, you eat essentially ad libitum until you're full. And but what matters overall is the macroscopic picture, as we were saying earlier. So you're still maybe eucaloric or hypocaloric, and you end up losing weight. Plus, the thing with Mike, yes, that meal is huge, but the amount of training that Mikey does in a day, like his whole life is revolves around jiu-jitsu. It's crazy. I do admire him because I will never be able to do that, even with anything like cooking. Even I don't know. So like I was probably like that for like 2 or 3 days when I was a kid, and I got the new like Pokemon game for the Game Boy. Like for 2 days I'll be playing for 8, maybe 10 hours, but then I was getting tired. No, it's been like bringing that intensity for decades now. So
Hmm.
yeah, it goes on hikes. It will like drill with his sisters, drill with his friends, uh, all sorts of things, be on the assault bike. And so at the end of the day, he can really eat whatever he wants. He's still gonna be shredded and lose weight.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. So I do want to kind of dive into the weight cutting topic here. So you seem to be able to help fighters cut weight in a way that's, obviously less miserable than not working with you. Cutting weight, dropping down, both elements, the chronic weight loss throughout the camp and then the water cut at the end. What's your kind of approach to, I know there is no perfect weight cut, but if you were to kind of outline a theoretical perfect weight cut, what would it look like? How early would you start, and how would you plan it?
Okay, what do you mean with the weight cut? You mean do you include the weight loss part, so the fat loss part, or you only mean the water cut? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think kind of both elements, like the weight loss part and then the water cut at the end.
Well, one note that's very important to put out there, because some people like, I mean, yeah, we have some very good weight cuts, but a weight cut, it's an extreme procedure. Um, and it's a professional risk that athletes are taking because they don't want to be in disadvantage and possibly like be hurt in other ways during the fight. It's never, I mean, if you do it properly, following some scientific guidelines, it can be safer, but it's never going to be safe. And it's something that needs to be put out there, is the elephant in the room. But yeah, there have been, unfortunately, some people that have been advertising their work saying, oh, with me the weight cuts are safe. No, they're safer, but it's always like it's a professional risk in an extreme sport. So
Mhm.
first thing to say. Second, ideally, I mean, it really depends where the athlete is compared to the weight class, because there are some athletes, I work with some athletes like Adman Shabazian, that he's not like huge for middleweight in the UFC. It doesn't mean that he's 190. He's like always like off camp. He's above like the 200 mark for sure, but he's not Paulo Costa big, and that makes puts us in a position where we can gradually lose the weight without like a huge deficit. Some other people that maybe are a little more stubborn and they want to stay in the lower weight class, that process looks much different. So I also want to say, like, picking the right weight class and not be afraid to move up. It's an important detail. Actually, it still has to come out. But the other day I recorded a podcast with Urosh Medic that just won last weekend. Um, he used to be a 155er when he started his MMA journey, and he was fighting in Alaska. That was not like, it was not his first job. Then he moved to California, started to train full time, and in like the kid is huge. He's like, I think he's 6'1". He has a big frame, and I told him, Urosh, I think your body has changed. You're like a full time athlete. So you need to move to 170. And he was like, I mean, he was open on the podcast, so I guess I can tell you. He was very stubborn about like staying at 155 because like, oh, people are gonna be much bigger. There's gonna be a reach like I have the reach advantage here, and he had some like pretty brutal weight cut. Like you could put all the science you wanted into that, but if the guy is too big, the weight cut is gonna be wild. So
Mhm.
picking the right weight class is I think it's paramount. Now he's at 170 and he can fight more often during the year. The weight cuts are not as stressful, and he's having a like a pretty good career at 170. So um, yeah, I will say pick the right weight class again. It's very important, but usually it really depends on how much the athlete's heavier than the weight class and how much body fat he carries. Uh, that really determines when we start the weight loss process, and then the goal is to keep the athlete as hydrated as possible as until like the closest to the weigh-ins. So that there's some old school methods that I've seen out there, especially even in relation to boxing, boxers and stuff, where the athletes are drinking less, say from the Tuesday. Like that should not be happening. We are definitely hydrating on Tuesday, on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we reduce the liquid intake, but the guys are still drinking. And then, of course, there's depending on how much the athlete needs to drop. Either we split the weight cut into two parts, at night and in the morning, or some athletes they just like go to sleep, try to fluctuate as much as they can, and they um, they wake up and they make the weight. So it's very hard to give you a time frame both for the weight loss um, and the water cut, because it heavily relies on each athlete's numbers.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And with regards to, obviously safety is the most important thing with weight cutting. And I think that, a lot of people, especially more inexperienced fighters, think that it's something that they can and should, do themselves. They can figure it out. What are some of the most, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see when inexperienced fighters are cutting weight, and maybe some things that are kind of red flags for you as being dangerous?
I mean, again, it's always a little not a, it's never 100% safe, but big red flags. Starting the dehydration very far away from weigh-ins, so like Tuesday, etc. And that doesn't just include not drinking. It also means like overdoing saunas or training with the sauna suit on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday. Absolutely unnecessary. I will say try to prioritize intensity when you're cutting the weight. So say get into a bath or in a sauna that's too hot, that can pose a real risk to your health. Yeah, if I had to name two, this will be the two. Like this process called weight cut, I would say it's a marathon. So it's about trying to sweat um, with the least strain on the body, and try to keep the sweat going. So you don't have to sprint, you don't have to run up a hill. You just, if like, I don't know if you, some people like being on the bike. So they just doing on a bike. Some people like to run, to jog. Some people like to hit pads. But, the only constant when it comes to that is keep the intensity low, because
Hmm.
that's gonna cause you issue. And then of course, the more you're dehydrated, the more you're prone to injury. So you don't want to tear an ACL while you're cutting weight. And again, like getting into like crazy hot baths, or like lock yourself like in a sauna at a very high temperature, that's also quite dangerous.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so after the fighters cut weight, there's obviously, a short window to rehydrate and get the fighters ready to perform the next day, usually for day before weigh-ins for MMA. Um, tell us a little bit about the rehydration process and refueling and how you usually facilitate that with your fighters.
Yes. And by the way, we're talking about fighters. I just want to specify that everything we say so far about the weight cuts is for UFC style weigh-ins. So not like IBJJF weigh-ins, because the whole scenario changes with IBJJF, where you weigh in and you compete right after. So the protocol will be completely different for a jiu-jitsu guy. But if we're talking about MMA, you make the weight usually Friday morning at 9 a.m., 9 to 11, that's the window. The priority must be rehydration. And I can tell you one big red flag when it comes to rehydration. Um, a lot of people think that, how do you say, the, the more the better. And so they take a bottle like this, and they squeeze a lot of electrolytes in it. So what this is gonna make, like water with a lot of electrolytes, or even like too much sugar, it's gonna make it's called, scientifically we refer to it as a hypertonic or hyperosmolar solution. That what happens once it gets to the gut, instead of hydrating, it's gonna like it's not gonna give us the optimal rehydration. It's actually, it might even how do you say, attract water to the intestinal lumen and might give us diarrhea. So the perfect rehydrating solution, that's how you call it in chemistry. I don't know if translation is right from Italian, but in Italian we call it soluzione, so I'm guessing solution is the right American word for it. But it has a concentration of sodium, like glucose, etc., that's close to the ORT, oral rehydration therapy. That's something that has been formulated over the years to help people rehydrate, not in moments like the post weigh-ins, but in areas of the world where there has been like famine, like and they cannot give maybe like thousands of people IVs at the same time, so they make these ORT, oral rehydration therapy. So that's what we're looking for. I will say what I try to do with my athletes, keep them away from foods for a little bit, for a few hours, especially like solid foods, because if you're not like properly hydrated, then you might have a harder time digesting. You might have some GI issue. The first, depending on, again, on how much weight the athlete cut, we rely primarily on drinks for the first hours, and then we slowly transition to solid food. And the solid food might look at the beginning for some people to like broth and bread. For other people, can be porridge. It really varies. Everyone, their own favorite. Yes, and then of course, as we go on with the day, then we start having like more pasta and things like that. Usually, we don't really load on fibers in those hours between the weigh-ins and the fight, because they're not as necessary as other nutrients. And yeah, again, we try to have as many carbohydrates as the body can tolerate, a medium amount of protein, and yeah, just like a pretty low amount of fat. I will say that if an athlete starts recharging with about, and this again, this is just dropping numbers here, doesn't mean that this number work for you, but I will say some athletes can have like 8, 9, 10, some people even 12 grams of carbohydrates per kilo per day. I think, yeah, that's amazing. When it comes to protein, you don't really need to hit those, like, some people like to go for 3 grams per kilo per day. I don't think that's necessary. And fat, we stay around, especially from like good fat, so avocado, olive oil, we're around 1 gram per kilo of body weight. So that's what we do. But again, hydration, I think, is the main thing, and then you transition to food, and of course you keep drinking, because you cannot forget that.
Absolutely. And the rate of hydration, is that another thing that are paying close attention to, not starting out with having your fighter absolutely chug a whole bottle, but are you kind of measuring it out and slowly increasing the rate of
Yeah,
rehydration?
absolutely. Yeah, it changes from person to person. I always like, I try to keep them away from like crazy cold, how do you say, bottles, because some people, they really like icy water, that, like, we try to stay away from that. So temperature is a factor, and definitely the rate, especially at the beginning. Absolutely. I usually have my phone with me, and I just use the timer. So I tell them, for this bottle, you have like 15 minutes, then we're going to transition. And I keep the bottles with me, because, it's better like to control that way. the rehydrate. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have another question about the weight cutting process. And it's actually more kind of about the weight loss process before the water cut. It's something that you mentioned in another interview that you did where the UFC PI has kind of technology where you can monitor and measure your fighter's basal metabolic rate, and that's something that you can keep track of and use it kind of in your calculations and in your plan. So I want to ask you a little bit about how you can monitor it and how it plays a role with, calculating the caloric deficit and the whole, weight loss plan that you create.
Well, actually, it's not just the. I mean, yes, they do measure the resting metabolic rate, but I think that varies so much depending on like what day you measure it. I wouldn't like heavily rely on that. I think the great thing that the UFC Performance Institute offers is they give you a DEXA scan, which is a very precise way to determine your bone density, your lean mass, and your fat mass. And and then also this is a tool that I think is amazing. It gives athletes perspective on their weight cuts. Depending on where you are, they give you a like a green light, a orange light, and a red light. So green light means, hey, say you measure this like this, you do this DEXA scan of season, like based on the data that we have here, like including your lean mass, you're gonna have like again, weight cut is always a risk, but it's gonna be overall like a manageable weight cut. Now there's orange, and it's like, yes, I guess it's gonna take like a level of effort. You need to be okay with it. Red, it's like it's gonna be a process,
Hmm.
and I think it's great that fighters, can see that. I'm sure that the nutrition stuff at the PI with Charstall, that I really consider him like a great ally when it comes to like a great colleague and ally when it comes to try to move like to bring the science into the sport is integrate the more measurement they make, the more observation that they make on UFC fighter, the more they customize these ranges. The science is always evolving, but I think that is amazing. So you have someone like Uroš Medic uh, at at the lightweight. It's probably like a heavy red, like was probably a heavy red.
Hmm.
Now is a welterweight, and by the way, it's not a small welterweight because he gained some mass too, and is eating properly now. It's probably like it's probably an orange, you know.
Hmm.
So that's something I really consider. And by the way, another thing that people don't talk about enough when it comes to making weight in combat sport, there are some cases where it's not that the athlete is fat, you know. Uh, it's not that the adipose tissue is too much in the athlete. It's just maybe it's too muscular for that weight class, and so the process doesn't just look like a fat loss process. You might have to reduce the lean mass too, and that's what happened. I think majestically, it's one of the weight cuts. One of my best weight cuts. I think it was with Cody Garbrandt when he decided to move down to 125. Um, Over that summer, because like you were asking how long does it take. In Cody Garbrandt's case, he fought in December, mid-December, but he hired me in July, I think, of the same year. So it was a long process
Hmm.
because he wanted to do it right. Over that summer, he got really into biking, and that like biking in that zone too. It was living at the time in NorCal, so it was really going on long rides. I'm talking about like I think he did once the whole like Lake Tahoe. He went around Lake Tahoe. It's huge. Um, and and yeah, in that case, I think he sacrificed a little bit of lean mass to have like a smoother cut. And I'm telling you, we had an amazing cut at 125. Now, the factors that determine like the outcome of a fight, unfortunately, it's not just the weight cut. There's like
Mm-hmm.
technical aspect, how your strategy, and it didn't go our way. Unfortunately, that was a very sad day for me because the work that has been done was amazing. So I will say like another takeaway message for athletes listening to this is uh, don't just look at the fat mass, also the lean mass, because that plays also a role. And it might be that you got too big, like especially starting your career at one weight class doesn't mean that you're gonna end your career in the same weight class, because that lifting that like happens for years over years over years is gonna increase your lean mass, and that might take you to a point where you're just too big for the weight class. Another example of that is Marvin Vettori. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Marvin used to fight at welterweight.
Mm-hmm.
That was when he was at London Shoot Fighter, and the only strength and condition was the Versa Climber. I remember I was doing all this Versa Climber. Um, then we came to California, and we met Corey Beasley. He trains Cheeto. He trains a bunch of athletes, and he started to lift, and he got bigger, like much bigger, much faster. And also, he was transitioning from like being a teenager to be an actual like a man, and to the point that he couldn't make welterweight anymore. And then he
Mm-hmm.
moved up to middleweight, and he ended up filling the weight class. Because I'm telling you now, you, Marvin is not a small middleweight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, lean mass is definitely crucial when it comes to make weight.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And so I'm glad you brought up a couple of the individual people that you work with, because I really want to talk to you about some more of the UFC fighters that you've worked with. Specifically, I want to start out with Khamzat Chimaev. Obviously, he just won the belt. Incredible, and it must feel incredible to have contributed to that camp with him. So I want to ask you a bit about the title fight camp with Khamzat and what you were doing for him.
Yeah. So as I was telling you at the beginning of the interview, with Kamsat became more of a hands-on experience. His manager reached out a few weeks before he came to the United States, telling me that he was coming to Southern California. He was training at what's the name of the gym? Like that Jackson gym they have down in Costa Mesa,
Hmm.
where Arman was also training, and he came with his whole crew from the UAE, from Chechnya, from Russia, and so they asked for like this like chef service if you want. So I was there with my with David Papi and my assistant, and literally we took care of their nutrition, like just Kamzat meticulously, but also we fed the rest of the team for 47 days. So that was crazy.
Wow.
I live in San Diego, and it's about 1 hour and 20 minutes from Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach, where we were staying. I rented a room there, in Orange County, because every morning I was getting there at 7:30, taking care of like all the breakfast, because before the guys will wake up, prepare Hamzat supplements, and essentially I will leave at night once they were done with dinner, and we kind of like you know uh, just set everything up for the following day. So it's been like that for 47 days. It's been amazing. Full immersion, and it paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he looked incredible in that fight. It was pure dominance. That was, I think, the most dominant title fight that I've ever seen. And what was it like to see him perform like that and know that you played a role in his fight camp?
Again, I think also among the I like to think that one of the characteristic of my job is being a honest person, and I want to specify, as I always say, Hamzat is a Ferrari, I just put the right fuel in. So sometimes you hear nutritionists, they're like, oh, because of me, they won. No, dude, that's not how it is. Like, you need to be good at the sport. You need to be good at the sport first. And then of course, you make those adjustments, strength and conditioning, this and that. To be honest with you, I did expect that he was going to win the belt. And that's why it took such a big commitment. Like, I literally like give up on everything I was doing for like a month and a half of my life to be around him. So the expectation was high, but especially coming from the previous camp that we prepared together with Robert Whittaker, seeing like how he performed, I was like, a fight is a fight, everything can happen, but I was confident he was gonna take the win. Now, the way he brought it home was very good for him, and was very good for me because there were a lot of naysayers, a lot of haters that were talking about like, oh, he doesn't have cardio, he gassed. Maybe gassed in the past, but guess what? He didn't anymore. So that was definitely a good look. I did enjoy the fight going over the third round and him keeping the same intensity. It was amazing. Yeah.
That's so, so cool. And I hope this isn't intruding. You don't have to answer this, but I do want to ask you, what is Hamzat's favorite thing that you make him?
Hmm. It's a good question. All the guys, like the whole team, they do love beef. They really love beef. So one recipe that I made from my traditional cuisine, it's a stew meat. We call it spezzatino. It's made with chuck roast and vegetables and tomato sauce. You let it slow cook until the beef is very very tender, and then you serve it with the side of polenta. So that's also very typical from my area. They did like that a lot. One day, so one of the members of the camp was Ilir Latifi, former UFC athlete, like light heavyweight, and he decided to treat the whole team with a barbecue. They did enjoy the barbecue a lot. And then one at the end of camp, I remember there was one of the guy that was from Pakistan. Um, I decided to get a little ambitious and I went out of my comfort zone. I made this chicken. I don't know what's the name, but it's like an Indian slash Pakistani recipe with a lot of spices and yogurt, and they did like that a lot. Yeah, so those are I would say the top three food experience I think they had.
Yeah, those sound delicious. Another person that I think people will be curious about is Arman. Does he have a favorite dish of yours that you make him?
Okay, so Arman really likes the cooking is also stealing, guys. And I'm not a chef, but I've been stealing a lot of elements from some Italian chef cuisine, and I'm never gonna get to that level. There is this restaurant in Italy. It's called Da Vittorio, 3 Michelin stars. So we're really talking about like top level of culinary art. And they made this pacchero with the tomato sauce, and I really liked that recipe. So I started to see how I could like try to recreate it. Of course, it's not the same thing, but it's a base of tomato sauce and basil and Parmigiano Reggiano with pasta. Armand really loves it. With a hint of spice, you put chili pepper. I put chili pepper inside. I don't remember if the original recipe has them, but Armand loved it. He's a big fan. I think I'm gonna take that to the recharge for the Dan Hooker fight.
I love that. That sounds absolutely delicious as well. I'm not much of a cook myself, but you're inspiring me. So maybe I'll steal some of your recipes for myself.
You're welcome. I need to be better at putting out content. Everyone tells me you should do more. Like, you'll go viral if you do it. And yeah, you're right. It's just So far, work has been so busy with the consulting. Not as like I mean the pros, of course, with the traveling, but the recreational athletes also that it's hard for like a nerd like me to just set up the camera and. But I'm trying to get better at that. So hopefully, we're gonna have some cooking videos in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people would have a big interest in that. We saw how cooking with Volk exploded. Obviously there's an interest in cooking and MMA, the intersection there. So I think that's a great idea. I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but there is one question that we kind of ask everybody that comes on the show. Obviously, our brand is Fighter's Advice, so we want to hear some advice from you regarding what just one piece of nutritional advice that you would give for either fighters or recreational jiu-jitsu athletes. If you could narrow it down to one piece of nutritional advice, what would it be?
If I really had to just give one advice, because I know I digress a lot being an Italian, I cannot stay on the topic. But if really I need to narrow it down, like eat mainly whole foods. Oh, actually, I'm okay. I'm gonna say one and a half advice. There's also a second. Eat to perform, not to look good. Fighting is a performance sport, not an aesthetic sport. So you need to always
Mm.
keep that in mind. And this is my one and a half advice.
That's great. That's really, really good advice. Is there anything that we didn't go over that you want to talk about, and maybe you could mention where people can find you if they're interested in reaching out and working with you?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. Again, I hope I didn't digress too much. We tend to really talk a lot. I like to nerd out when it comes to these topics. Um, you can find me on Instagram at dr like doctor and then my last name Capodaglio, Doctor Dr Capodaglio. I have also a YouTube channel, Capo Nutrition, and I actually just added to the team a media assistant. So with the goal of putting out more stuff, more video blogs, and all of that. And yeah, if you're either professional athlete or even a recreational athlete that just wants to find a way to perform at their best while like running a family, like having a job. That's what I do besides working with these rock stars. So my website is caponutrition.com, and you can reach out from there or through a DM on Instagram.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Best of luck with the Arman camp. I know he's gonna smash it. It's gonna be an amazing fight. Hope you have safe travels as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.